The morning at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport moved the way it always moved in the Sky Club corridor on a late November Tuesday, with the quiet efficiency of people who had decided, long ago, that they had earned a certain kind of stillness. The carpet was dark and thick underfoot. The lighting was low and gold. At the entrance to the Delta Sky Club on Concourse F, 2 attendants in matching navy blazers stood at their posts with the practiced ease of people trained to make the right travelers feel immediately welcome, and to make the wrong ones understand, without anything rude being said aloud, that they had simply wandered somewhere they did not belong. It was into this corridor that Josephine Ray stepped just after 9 in the morning, pulling a small canvas tote behind her on worn wheels. She was 78 years old. She wore a navy wool coat that had fit her better 20 years ago and a pair of sensible lace-up shoes that had seen too many airport terminals to remember. Her silver hair was pinned at the back, in a soft, practical knot. She wore no rings other than the thin gold band on her left hand. She had the quiet, unhurried look of a woman who had been many places and was in no particular hurry to prove it to anyone. In her coat pocket, folded once, was her Delta Platinum Medallion card. She had held that card for 11 consecutive years. She held it the way a person holds something they have simply always had, without ceremony, the way they hold a house key. She stepped to the Sky Club entrance and waited her turn. The man behind the counter was Franklin Keene. He was 44 years old, the Sky Club supervisor for this concourse, and he wore his navy blazer the way certain men wear authority, as though they had waited a long time for it and intended to be careful with every ounce. He had a sharp face and careful eyes, and in 12 years managing premium airport lounges, he had developed an instinct he trusted completely. He could read a traveler in 3 seconds. The shoes, the bag, the way they held their body when they approached the desk. He read Josephine in less than that. He stepped forward with a professionally warm smile and positioned himself so that she would have to stop. "Good morning, ma'am," he said. "I'm sorry, this entrance is reserved for Sky Club members and business select travelers. Are you perhaps looking for the main terminal seating area? It's just back through the—" "I'm a member," Josephine said simply. She opened her coat pocket and placed the card on the counter. Keene looked at it. He did not pick it up. He looked at it the way a man looks at something he has already decided is not quite right, then turned to his screen and typed very slowly, as though hoping the delay itself would discourage her. "And this card is in your name?" "It is." "Are you certain this isn't a companion card, perhaps issued under a spouse's account? We do see that sometimes with older—" "It is my card," Josephine said. Her voice did not rise. "My name is on it, you can see that." Keene tilted his head. Around him, a small line had formed. 4 or 5 travelers had arrived behind Josephine, and Keene felt their presence the way a performer feels an audience assembling. The awareness did not quiet him. It made him more precise. "Ma'am, I'm sure you understand that we have to protect the integrity of the lounge experience for our genuine members. It's a matter of policy. If you have a booking confirmation I can verify." "I verified it online this morning," Josephine said. "The card number ends in 7741. You can see that on your screen right now." Keene looked at his screen. He could see it. He typed a small unnecessary thing, then looked back up. Behind Josephine, someone shifted their weight with a quiet, impatient sound. Near the back of the line, a man named Gideon Tate was watching. He was 57 years old. Broad in the chest and shoulders in the way of men who had spent 30 years moving through steel mills rather than office corridors. His hair had gone almost entirely gray. He wore a flannel shirt under an open canvas jacket, clean and pressed but clearly not bought for airports. He carried a single small duffel. His hands were large and still, and they had the particular patience of hands that had learned, over 3 decades of working around dangerous machinery, that stillness was not weakness. It was precision. Gideon had spent those 30 years as a shift supervisor at a structural steel plant outside Birmingham. He had raised his daughter alone from the time she was 4 years old, after her mother left and did not come back. He had learned to braid hair using a YouTube video. He had packed school lunches at 5 in the morning before a 6 o'clock shift. He had missed 2 of his own birthdays because they fell on parent-teacher conference days. And he had never once mentioned this to his daughter, because it had not seemed like a sacrifice worth naming. His daughter, Laurel Tate, stood beside him now. She was 29 years old, a junior partner at a mid-sized Atlanta law firm, with offices on the 41st floor of a building she had once ridden past on a Greyhound bus and thought, someday. She wore a camel blazer and slim dark slacks and heels that she had broken in carefully, because she had understood early that in the rooms she wanted to enter, appearance was its own kind of argument. She had bought her father a business-class ticket for this trip, to visit her brother in Phoenix. She had added the Sky Club access because she wanted him to sit somewhere quiet and have a real cup of coffee before a flight. For once in his life, she had not anticipated being tested in it. Laurel saw the scene at the counter clearly. She recognized the posture of the man in the blazer. She had seen it at conference tables, in depositions, in the long polished hallway outside a courtroom. It was the posture of someone who had decided the outcome before the conversation began and was now performing the process of deciding. She felt something stir uncomfortably in her chest. And then she registered the man 2 spots behind her in line. Reginald Sato, senior partner. The man whose opinion would determine whether her name appeared on the firm's letterhead before her 30th birthday or after her 35th. He was looking at his phone, but he was there, and she knew from long experience that Reginald Sato missed nothing while appearing to look at his phone. Gideon leaned slightly toward her. His voice was low. You seeing this? Laurel kept her eyes forward. It's probably a verification thing, Dad. It'll sort itself out. Gideon looked at his daughter for a moment. He did not argue. He turned back to the counter and watched Keene deliver his next line. Ma'am, Keene was saying, just loudly enough, if you could simply step to the side. I can have someone assist you separately while we continue boarding our verified. I don't need to step to the side, Josephine said. I need you to type in the card number you can already see on your screen. A woman near the front of the line laughed softly, then caught herself. A man in a sharply cut suit pretended to check a flight notification on his watch. Keene's expression did not change, but something behind it did. He folded his hands on the counter. Ma'am, I've been doing this for 12 years. I can tell when a card has been. Gideon stepped out of line. He did not hurry. He walked the way he always walked, with the even, deliberate pace of a man who had spent years crossing wet concrete floors in the dark, where hurrying was how people got hurt. He moved past 2 travelers, nodded once to an older gentleman who stepped aside, and came to stand beside Josephine, not in front of her, beside her. He looked at Keene. The card number is on your screen, he said. Type it in. Keene turned his head slowly. He took in the flannel shirt, the canvas jacket, the duffel bag, the gray hair, the absence of everything his 12 years had taught him to recognize as belonging here. Sir, he said, with the particular coldness of a man who has found a second target, are you a Sky Club member? I am, Gideon said. My daughter got me in, but that's got nothing to do with this. If you'd like to wait your turn in line. She's been waiting, Gideon said. She's been standing here while you performed a policy check that takes 30 seconds, and you've stretched to 5 minutes. Run the card. The corridor was very quiet. Keene's smile was thin and fixed. Sir, I appreciate your concern, but I'm going to have to ask you to return to your place in line, or I will need to ask for assistance. Get your assistants, Gideon said. Get your manager. Get whoever you need, and while you wait for them, run the card. Laurel had moved to the edge of the velvet rope. She could feel Reginald Sato's presence behind her, the way you feel a draft from a door that someone has left slightly open. She told herself she would step forward in one moment. She told herself she was assessing the situation. She told herself a lot of things in a very small number of seconds. Josephine turned her head slightly and looked at Gideon. Her eyes were a steady, light brown, and they had the quality of eyes that had seen a great deal of the world and been neither destroyed nor hardened by it. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "I've dealt with this before." That sentence landed somewhere in Gideon's chest and sat there, heavy and wrong. "I know," he said. "That's the problem." He turned back to Keen. "She said she's dealt with this before. She's 70-something years old, and she's standing in an airport having to deal with this. Does that strike you as something you want to be part of?" Keen had by now pressed the small call button beneath his counter. He was waiting for reinforcement and using the waiting to perform composure. "Mr." He glanced at the Tate. "Your Sky Club access has been noted. I'm going to ask you one more time to return to your position, or I will be forced to flag your access as disruptive." "Flag it," Gideon said. Laurel closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she opened them and stepped forward. She did not look at Reginald Sato. She did not look at the line. She looked at her father, and at the old woman standing beside him, and something in her face changed, very slightly, the way a window changes when the light outside shifts. She reached Gideon's side. She put her hand briefly on his arm and leaned in close enough that only he could hear. "Dad, please. We have a flight." Gideon turned to look at his daughter. He was not angry with her. He had never been angry with her for very long, even when she was small and impossible, because underneath every impossible thing she had ever done, he had always been able to see the shape of the person she was trying to become. "Do you want me to stop?" he asked quietly. "Because I'm wrong, or because it's easier?" Laurel did not answer right away. Josephine pressed her hand lightly to her collarbone, drawing a slow breath. The color at the edges of her face had gone thin. Keen noticed. His voice shifted to something almost clinical. "Ma'am, you look a little unwell. Perhaps the stress of—" "She's not unwell," Gideon said. "You've been standing her here for 10 minutes in a coat, when it's 80 degrees in this corridor. That's why she looks like that." He turned to Josephine. "You all right, ma'am?" She looked at him with something that was almost amusement, even now. "I'm fine," she said. "I'm just tired of being managed." 2 airport operations staff had arrived by then, moving down the corridor with the measured calm of people, called to smooth something out before it became official. Keen spoke to them first, establishing the narrative while it was still his to establish. He used the words irregular and unverified and unfortunately and protocol. He said the gentleman had become disruptive. He said the elderly woman had refused to cooperate with standard verification procedures. He said it all in the gentlest possible register, which made the words do more damage than anger would have. Josephine tried to explain. She said her name. She said the card number. She said she had been a Platinum Medallion member since 2013. One of the operations staff, a younger man with a patient face, had turned toward the counter to look at the screen. Keen spoke over him. "The flight is boarding in 18 minutes. If we could move this to a side area." "Don't move it to a side area," Gideon said directly to the operations staff. "Look at the screen. The name matches the card. This takes 15 seconds. Why are we still here?" The younger operations man hesitated. He had the look of someone trying to determine which authority was more dangerous to contradict. He reached past Keen toward the keyboard. Keen's hand came down near the keyboard without quite touching it. "I've already conducted the verification." "You haven't," Gideon said. "You looked at the card and decided before you typed anything. Everyone in this line watched you do it." A quiet shifted through the corridor. Several people lowered their eyes. The man in the sharp suit had stopped checking his watch. Laurel stood very still. She had built her career on reading rooms, on knowing which argument would land, which phrase would move a jury, which silence would do more work than any word. She was reading this room now, and what she saw in it was not what she had been afraid of. She had been afraid of exposure, of her father saying something blunt in front of someone who mattered, of the scene following her into Monday morning. What she saw instead was a line full of people who were ashamed of themselves, and a woman in a worn navy coat, who had done nothing except exist in the wrong outfit in the wrong corridor, and her father, in his flannel shirt, holding the line with no backup and no strategy, except the plain fact of being right. She thought of every time she had rehearsed the right thing to say, and then said the easier thing instead. She stepped fully to her father's side. "Look at the screen," she said to the younger operations man, clearly and without hedging. "Her name is there. Her card number is there. We'd like to understand why that isn't enough." The younger man typed. The system returned the confirmation in 11 seconds. Josephine Ray, Platinum Medallion. Member since 2013. The corridor was very quiet. Keene looked at the screen. His expression was carefully managed, but something behind it had cracked through. He began to say the word misunderstanding. He did not finish the sentence. A new set of footsteps had entered the corridor from the direction of the administrative offices, not the brisk, errand-running footsteps of operations staff, but the quicker, controlled footsteps of people who had been told to move without losing their composure. 3 of them, 2 women and a man in dark business clothing, walking with the particular focus of people who know exactly where they are going and why. They did not acknowledge Keene. They stopped in front of Josephine Ray, and the woman at the front, a tall woman with close-cropped gray hair and a leather portfolio under her arm, spoke first. "Mrs. Ray, I am deeply sorry for the delay. The boardroom on C concourse is prepared for you. Mr. Delacroix sends his apologies for not greeting you personally at the arrivals level." Keene's head turned slowly. The woman with the portfolio glanced at him once. Her expression did not change. She looked the way people look when they have already written a report in their head and are simply waiting for the meeting to confirm it. "Mrs. Ray," she said, "is the founder and chair of the Ray Family Foundation, which committed $43 million to the construction of this terminal's international expansion. She also holds a seat on the Delta Advisory Council and has been a Platinum Medallion member for 11 consecutive years." She paused. "I believe you have her card number on your screen." The line did not move. The man in the sharp suit lowered his watch arm to his side. The woman who had laughed and then caught herself had turned to look at the carpet. Keene's face had gone the color of old paper. He said the word misunderstanding again. He said the word policy. He said he had only been trying to protect the integrity of the, and then he stopped, because the woman with the portfolio had not looked at him again, and the absence of her attention was worse than any response. Josephine reached across the counter and took her card back from where Keene had left it. Her hand was steady. She did not raise her voice. She had run a foundation for 31 years. She had sat in rooms where very large men said very dismissive things, and she had learned that volume was almost never the point. She turned to Franklin Keene and spoke so that everyone in the corridor could hear, without any effort on her part, because her voice had the particular clarity of someone who has learned to make rooms work for her, rather than against her. "You did not question my card," she said. "You questioned whether a woman who looked like me deserved to be where she was standing. Those are different things. I want you to know the difference, even if knowing it now costs you something." Keene opened his mouth. Nothing that came out assembled itself into a sentence. A senior Delta representative had arrived by then, slightly out of breath. He began the choreography of institutional apology, the investigation, the isolated incident, the comprehensive review. He used the words deeply and sincerely, in close proximity to each other several times. Josephine listened for a moment, then cut the sentence in half. "Want to know," she said quietly, "how many people went through this corridor today who did not have 43 million reasons for anyone to come running?" The representative had no answer for that. Josephine asked that the incident be formally documented. She asked for the security footage to be preserved. She asked for the name of whoever managed the customer response process for accessibility and elder traveler complaints. Keene's badge was collected before the corridor finished boarding. He walked past the velvet rope and did not look at anyone as he went. A few of the passengers who had been quiet shifted slightly, as people shift when the pressure in a room changes, and they are not yet sure what to do with their hands. A woman in a structured blazer near the front of the line stepped toward Josephine. "Mrs. Ray," she said. "I could have spoken up a great deal sooner than I did, I'm sorry." Josephine looked at her evenly. "Don't apologize to me because you found out I matter," she said. "Save it for the next person you see standing where I was standing, who won't have anyone come down that corridor for them." The woman had nothing to say to that. Josephine turned then and looked at Gideon Tate for a long moment. He was standing where he had been standing the entire time, still unhurried, still without posture, in his flannel shirt and his canvas jacket, holding his duffel and watching her with the steady attention of a man who had waited for a lot of things in his life and had learned to wait well. "Mr. Tate," she said, "in 12 years of traveling on that card, you are the first person who stepped out of line before they knew it would cost them nothing." Gideon shook his head slightly. "I just did what made sense." She considered that. "It should be common," she said. "It isn't, that's the thing." When the boarding area began to settle back into itself, Laurel found herself standing very close to her father. Not performing closeness. Simply there, in the way she had not quite been for the last 20 minutes and knew it. She did not look like a junior partner just then. She looked like a daughter, who had done something she could not undo, and was trying to decide what to do with that. "Dad," she said. Yeah, he wasn't looking at her. He was watching Josephine speak quietly with the woman from the advisory council. "I almost didn't step in. I know. I was thinking about Reginald." Gideon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Is Reginald still there?" Laurel looked back. Reginald Sato was still in the line, his phone in his hand, watching the corridor settle. He was watching her father. She could not read his expression, and she realized she didn't need to. "Yeah," she said. Gideon picked up his duffel. Then he saw the whole thing. He said it simply, without satisfaction, like a fact. Laurel wiped the back of her hand across her eye quickly, the way she had trained herself to do in depositions, when something caught her off guard. "I forgot," she said. "For a minute I forgot what you raised me to do." Gideon reached over and straightened the collar of her blazer, the way he had straightened the collar of her school uniform, when she was 5 years old, and too excited to stand still in the mornings. "You remembered before it was over," he said. "That counts." On the plane, Josephine Ray asked the flight attendant if the gentleman with the gray hair and canvas jacket might be seated beside her for the flight. She said it as a request, not a requirement, and the attendant moved things around without hesitation. Gideon settled into the seat and looked out the oval window at the tarmac, where the ground crew was moving in their orange vests in the clear November light. After a while, Josephine began to speak quietly. She told him that when her husband, Leonard, was alive, they had been so poor in the early years that they had taken their vacations in the car, driving down to the Georgia coast and sleeping in shifts so the children could sleep flat in the back seat. She told him that Leonard had made one promise to her that he had repeated every year for 38 years of their marriage, which was that someday he would take her to fly first class somewhere, anywhere, and she could put her feet up and have a real glass of wine and not think about anything for 4 hours. He had died 3 years ago, before he could do it, so she had started flying first class, and Sky Club herself. Because it turned out that doing the thing he had always meant to do for her was the closest she could get to doing it with him. She said she brought his photograph in the canvas tote. She had been bringing it for 3 years. Gideon listened. He did not fill the silence after she finished. Then he told her about raising Laurel. Not the version he told at retirement dinners, the clean version with the good moments lined up in the right order. The real version. The morning when Laurel was 7 and had a fever of 103, and he had to call in to the foreman, and the foreman had said if he called in one more time that week, he was going to lose the differential, and Gideon had said fine, take the differential, and had gone back to Laurel's room and sat with her until the fever broke, and he had watched the sun come up through her window and thought, "I would do this every single morning, for the rest of my life, without complaint." He told her about the night Laurel had called him, 2 years into law school, crying because she didn't think she was smart enough to be there, and he had talked to her from his truck in the plant parking lot for 45 minutes while the other guys on his shift went inside without him. Josephine listened to all of it without moving. "She stepped in," Josephine said finally. "She did," Gideon agreed. "Late," Josephine said, not unkindly. "She got there," Gideon said. Josephine smiled at that. It was a small smile and a real one. Across the aisle, Laurel Tate had her eyes closed, or appeared to. She was listening. She had always been good at listening without showing it, which was part of why she was a good lawyer, and part of why she had missed things she should not have missed. She was not missing this. She listened to her father's voice, the same voice that had talked her through fevers, through long drives to college orientation, through the particular silence of the first Christmas, after her mother was gone. And she felt something she had not felt in a long time, which was the steady, unambiguous shape of who she came from. She thought about the morning and all the calculations she had made in it. The small, fast accounting of what each second of visibility might cost her. She thought about Reginald Sato watching her father step out of line before she did, and she understood that whatever he had seen, it was something she wanted more of, not less. After the plane leveled off and the city of Atlanta had become a gray-green grid below them, Gideon rested his hands in his lap and looked out the window at the open sky. Josephine said quietly, "You didn't know who I was." "No," he said. "Would it have changed anything?" He thought about it honestly, the way he thought about every real question. "No," he said. "You were standing there alone. That was all I needed to know." She looked at him for a moment. "Leonard would have liked you," she said. Gideon smiled slowly. Was he a flannel shirt kind of man? "He was absolutely a flannel shirt kind of man," she said. "He just would have ironed it first." Gideon laughed. It was a quiet laugh, the kind that costs nothing and gives something, and it moved into the space between them and stayed there comfortably, the way the best silences do. In the weeks that followed, Delta Airlines announced a full review of its Sky Club access protocols and implemented a mandatory retraining program focused on age, appearance, and class-based discrimination. A new passenger advocacy line was established specifically for elderly and accessibility-affected travelers. Franklin Keene's personnel file, when reviewed during the investigation, contained 6 prior incidents that had been noted and filed and not followed upon. He did not return to premium hospitality work. Josephine Ray made a single public statement. She did not speak about the money she had given. She spoke about what it felt like to stand in a corridor for 10 minutes with a valid card in her hand, while a line of people with the means and the standing to say something chose instead to look elsewhere. She said that the silence of capable people in those moments was not neutral. It had weight. It pressed down on the person it surrounded. Laurel Tate read the statement at her desk on the 41st floor and sat with it for a long time, before she got up and went to ask her father, on the phone, whether she could come home for the weekend. He said of course. He said he would make the chili she liked. She drove down on Saturday morning, and when she pulled into his driveway in Birmingham and saw the lights on in the kitchen window, the same window she had looked up at every morning for the first 18 years of her life, she sat in the car for a moment before she went inside. She was thinking about a Tuesday morning in November, and a woman in a navy coat, and a corridor full of people who had calculated the cost of saying the right thing and found it too high. And she was thinking about her father, who had not calculated anything, who had simply looked at someone standing alone and walked over, the way you walk towards something that has always been obvious, because it was. The chili was good. It was always good. They sat at the kitchen table until late in the evening, and at some point, the conversation stopped being about anything in particular, and became the kind of conversation that is really just two people sitting in the same room, comfortable with each other, not needing the silence to mean anything more than it did. It was, Laurel thought, on the drive home in the dark, one of the best nights she'd had in a long time. She did not know how to explain why, exactly. Only that there was something clarifying about sitting across from a person who had never once, in her entire life, looked at another human being, and decided they weren't worth the trouble. She wanted to carry more of that. She intended to try.